Hello and welcome to my channel, where at bare minimum you'll learn how to make a mean cocktail in the first 5 seconds, give or take. A full recipe card will be available at the end. Today is March 13th, 2021, the 72nd day of the year anniversary of, well, this, and nearly the end of the first quarter of 2021. It's at this point, according to the very reputable and very well-known Western Connecticut Health Network.org, that around 90% of people have already thrown in the towel on their New Year's resolutions. I've been there before, and honestly, I thought 2021 was a shoo-in to be part of that same shitty cycle. After all, it's like 2021 came in a bundle pack with the world's greatest excuse to get absolutely nothing done, at least until certain things blow over. However, upon further inspection, I realized that has not been my experience at all. Quite the opposite, in fact. Now, I've been pleasantly aware that I've been on track, if not ahead, with a lot of my long-term goals for the year, such as my active calorie, reading, and Duolingo quotas. But when it came to things I'd already accomplished, I was stunned to see that I had done nearly 4 times as much as I had last year at this time, pre-quarantine at all. Ever since that realization, I've been struggling to understand why. I don't feel like I've been working noticeably harder or even focusing on those goals more. The best answer I can come up with relates to one of the few positive aspects of this quarantine: a lot more reading time. Especially with the summer months of lockdown, there was this overwhelming theme of using these 4 or 5 months to reinvent ourselves. And I think that ended up changing a lot of my reading habits. I ended up reading 4 times as much as I had in 2019 and 2020. And a lot of it was nonfiction. Now, I will earmark this video with the fact that I do not like most self-helpy types of books. I feel like most of the advice is just vague, good general knowledge packaged in 300 to 400 pages, and it targets a group of people that are, downtrodden or, struggling with things in life, and I find, most of it kind of be reprehensible, to be honest. However, per the recommendation of Tim Ferriss's Tribe of Mentors book, and a lot of recommendations made by YouTubers I admire here on this platform, I decided to explore a bit more into this genre. Now, some were definitely still duds. I'm looking at You, the Archer. I was pleasantly surprised by a few that really stood out to me. Now, while these books were wildly different and focused on a variety of things, they shared a lot of similar traits. They all had specific calls to action. They backed up their perspective using a variety of case studies and anecdotal references from a variety of people within that field. And additionally, they weren't that long, right? They ranged and averaged, I think, around 300 pages each. So if you happen to be part of the 90% that see those goals slipping through your fingers this early in the year, these books might offer a corrective course of action, as they apparently already did for me. Book 1 is Goodbye Things by Fumio Sasaki. At the tail end of 2020, I moved from an apartment into this townhome that you see here. I had not only a desire to upgrade my size of living, but my overall lifestyle in general. Part of that meant parting with the old, the used up, and the excessive. A part of this Readapalooza of the quarantine, I had been learning a lot about Zen Buddhism, and a lot of their primary teachings revolve around paring down one's belongings to truly and adequately care for the things that you have in your life and feel gratitude towards them. I donated or got rid of essentially all of my furniture, as well as about half my wardrobe, just in the process of moving. By the time I finished moving, I felt like a new person, not just living in a new building, but I was only surrounded by things that mattered to me. And I was chasing that high, and I wanted to learn more. It was through this pursuit of knowledge that I stumbled across Goodbye Things one day at Barnes & Noble. A reformed maximalist, Fumio Sasaki has become famous throughout Japan, as well as now the West, for his 215 square foot apartment, showcasing his 150 belongings in total. After giving his background, explaining his mindset changes, as well as explaining this Danshari fad that's just sweeping the world at the moment, what really hooked me about this book were the case studies that he featured about happiness. One psychologist specifically cited that 50% of our happiness is genetically determined, 40% is determined by our daily actions, such as habits, and a measly 10% is determined by our overall life standing as well as environment. On paper, this just seems bananas, but it also adds a lot of insight into why people like Ellen DeGeneres can get on camera and feel absolutely comfortable bemoaning her situation in her $100 million mansion and comparing it to being in prison. To all of this, it sounds remarkably tone deaf, and it absolutely is. But when you think about it only maybe factoring into her happiness level by 10%, it makes a lot more sense. She truly was unhappy, and all of her wealth and opulence wasn't doing anything to fix that. She might need to focus on her habits more. If our environment can only affect our happiness level by 10%, why spend time accumulating a lot of material possessions? On top of that, Sasaki proposes this notion that every object within your environment puts out noise into the universe, that our brains, which have not evolved significantly in the last 50,000 years, have to interpret and process. It's not just a pile of 5 dishes that are sitting dirty in your sink. It's an object that when you pass by it, you think, oh my gosh, what an awful thing that I have to do later, which also turns into, man, if work wasn't so hard, I could keep my apartment cleaner, which turns into, man, my job is so demanding, I'm not getting paid enough, which turns to, etc., etc., etc. Think about where that recursive stream of thought began, and it might not have started at all if you just owned less plates. Ironically, while overall very highly reviewed, Sasaki's work has received a lot of negative criticism from Western readers who very much disagreed with his extremist views of minimalism. But what was so weird about that is that he never imposes that level of extremism upon the reader. In fact, quite the opposite. My definition of a minimalist is a person who knows what is truly essential for him or herself, who reduces the number of possessions that they have for the sake of things that are really important to them. If he saw my home, he'd probably think it was as cluttered as a Midwestern antique mall. But for me, this feels absolutely perfect for the moment. That could always change. And I got here today using the 55 methods that he proposes to his readers, 3 of which in particular really seemed to help me out the most. The first was to minimize anything that you have multiples of, and for me this was humongous when it came to my kitchen. I had a ton of kitchen paraphernalia, most of which had been gifted down to me by my parents after I graduated college. While an extremely kind and considerate thing for them to do, for someone that may or may not eat lean cuisines most of the nights of the week, 5 soup ladles were completely lost on me. The second tip was to take photos of things that you were wishing to part with to make the parting easier. I did this with a lot of very important documents, burrowing those away in very encrypted cloud environments, as well as greeting cards I had accumulated over time to make sure that I could still save those precious messages that people had given me. Third and finally was to rent what could be rented. Going through my closet, I was ridiculously ashamed by the amount of full-length gowns I had. I had over 5 for reference. Most of which were just sitting there collecting dust. I had not worn them in years, but I always kept them out of the what if I need them mentality. The real answer is that every time I thought I might need them, I would just go out and buy a new one anyway. So what is the point of buying a new one just for them always to sit in the back of the closet? Services like Rent the Runway exist for this exact purpose, so you don't waste hundreds of dollars every time you've got to go to a black tie wedding. Goodbye things helped me prime my living space and therefore my headspace to tackle this new year and start it off strong. I eliminated my noise and focus therefore came a lot easier. Book number 2 is Atomic Habits by James Clear. As if 2020 wasn't offering enough already, at the age of 28, I had my first bout with cystic acne. After waiting literally months to see a dermatologist and receive my prescription, I was desperate to ensure its success. With a litany of topicals that I now needed to use, as well as tests to see if I could use them for a certain number of days in a row, it was then that I stumbled across Ali Abdaal's recommendation of Atomic Habits, to use to manage this brand new routine I had never done before. If I could just pick one line from this book to leave you with today, it's this: every action you take is a vote for the person that you wish to become. In summary, author James Clear proposes that through our various daily habits, our identities are shaped, and vice versa. And thus, to change them, one needs to do two things. First, decide upon the identity that you wish to have, and then prove it to yourself with small wins every single day. You don't have to hit a PR every time that you go to the gym. Even walking through the door is better than staying at home on the couch. Walk slowly, but never backward, and never miss twice in a row. The more I read, the less it became about managing the battle of the bulge that was going on in my face, and more about my life in general. Clear opens up every single chapter with an anecdote that sets the table for the main argument of the subsequent chapter, and my favorite was pertaining to the cycling instructor David Brailsford. Sir David Brailsford was given the unpleasant task of reviving the famously unsuccessful British cycling team to a new standing of glory. To tackle this seemingly insurmountable task, he implemented a technique that is now referred to as the aggression of marginal gains. If you broke down everything you can think of when it comes to cycling into atomic-sized pieces, anything from the angle in which someone is sitting on the seat to the tightness of their shoes, and improved every one of those pieces by 1%, his argument was that the overall whole will be massively improved. And it seems that he was right. Within just a few years of his coaching, the Brits scooped up their first big Tour de France win and held that title for 5 of the next 6 years, scooping up some Olympic golds along the way. That story struck a really big chord with me. A lot of the things I was trying to make habits of, like illustrated journaling, for example, they weren't necessarily contributing to the person that I was striving to be. And for the things that would contribute for the person I want to be, I was not taking that 1% improvement, never fail twice mentality for. For example, for years I've been very vocal about my dream to move abroad for work. Yet outside of my daily Duolingo practice, what was I really doing to facilitate that rather lofty goal? Was I networking appropriately? Was I honing niche skills that I was already pseudo-talented at to stand out from my peers? Was I advocating and publishing my success for others to pick up on? The answer was a big fat no. After introspecting pretty deeply on what those new habits would be, I used Clear's 4-step process to establish and maintain this brand new life structure. These 4 attributes he focuses on are the habit's cue, its craving, its response, and its reward. Not only did I finally clear up my complexion, but I finally implemented a daily structure that is more suited to facilitating the person that I am attempting to become. Habitify is definitely now one of my most used applications on my iPhone. Finally, book number 3 is The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. This was one of the books I read thanks to Tim Ferriss's Tribe of Mentors collection of interviews. It was recommended by Soman Kahiana. I'm really grateful to past Lauren for giving this book an honest try. Out of the 3 that I've recommended today, this by far was the one I thought was a shoo-in to be a vague, fluffy personal development book. And honestly, it might come off like that at the beginning, but I could not have been more wrong with that assumption. Author and artist Steven Pressfield has a bit of a dramatic flair when it comes to the narrative of this book. It's pretty poetic in structure and rather short in length, but don't let that fool you. A lot of self-help books discuss about how fear and anxiety can hold us back from the things that we want in life. But what Pressfield described and coined as the word resistance, I found to be a lot more common, a lot more sinister, and a lot more effective at impeding us from those pursuits. Pressfield describes resistance as evil, preventing us from achieving the life God intended when given endowed each of us with our own unique gifts. It's this persistent friction, this undercurrent of misery that rears its head when you try out a new business venture, or you're trying to think about publishing a piece of artwork, or you're wanting to start a new diet, where fear and anxiety are pretty heavy-handed and can end up shaming us and therefore impelling us to do the work. Resistance is a lot more subtle. It deploys this weapon of rationalization to freeze us in our steps. Everywhere, and seemingly from everyone, we see very rational, plausible reasons to not try. It's in the stares of your friends when you decide not to drink on a night out. It's that 3-star review on your Etsy store. It's a notion that your coworkers could possibly find your new YouTube channel. But there's the rub. Resistance does not come from peripheral opponents. It comes from within yourself. After all, if we're correct in this pursuit and we truly are bigger than we think we are in the previous moment, we estrange ourselves from everything that we know currently. It's a rather scary thing to come face to face with. This book is divided very neatly into 3 parts. The first is describing what resistance is. The second is offering suggestions on how to combat the resistance. And then finally, how do we orient ourselves moving forward? Resistance might be the most common thing that stops people in their tracks from trying new things. But the flip side of that coin is that resistance is directly proportional to our passion and love. Resistance can be used as a compass, and that calling we must follow before all others. The more important a call is to our soul's evolution, the more resistance we will feel. Once we truly discover where our compasses are pointing, Pressfield recommends that we do not treat this pursuit like an amateur. Treat it like a professional from day one. Professionals understand the delayed gratification of the craft. They show up daily no matter what, knowing the stakes are real. They focus on honing their technique, taking both criticism and praise with composure and grace. They do not tolerate disorder. They do not cede their sovereignty to others. Hearing the concept of art and similar pursuits framed in this manner was a huge eye-opener to me. In our culture, it's so much more common and romantic to entertain the ideal of the inspired artist, right? Someone that through a combination of talent and divine intervention is what they employ to create their works. However, hearing art and passion projects described in Pressfield's way is why I'm sitting here in front of a camera today. I recently have started making videos coincidentally for my personal job, and I've fallen in love with the process. It's something that I've really found to like. For a long time, even prior to creating videos for work, I kind of romanticized the idea of starting a YouTube channel, but I never did. What would I even talk about? I don't have the authority on anything valuable to people. God, what if my friends and colleagues at work find out? It's probably not the best use of my time. I should probably focus on things for my career. The war of art is what finally put an end to that strain of thinking. Everything is worth an honest try. In summary, Goodbye Things helped clear my area and my head of distracting noise. Atomic Habits helped get me on track and keep me on track through the aggression of marginal gains in pursuit of my new established label. And the War of Art helped me define my resistance and use it better as a compass. I earnestly hope that if you give one or all of them a try, that you get as much out of them as I did. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you like what you saw here today, tossing me a like would mean a lot, considering especially this is my first video. And if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. The nice thing about a new YouTube channel is there's not a lot of competition for response times. Pretty much free real estate down there, so leave one if you're interested. If you'd like to see more from me as well, I'm fixing to put out a video every 2 weeks. Go ahead and click subscribe. And with that, cheers.